Welcome to Cozy Side Audio, where every story pulls you deeper. If you like the thrill, the mystery, and the chase, like, share, and subscribe. Cozy Side Audio presents The Neon Revenant, Chapter 1, Afterlife Circuitry. The first sensation was heat. Not the warmth of sunlight, Arata hadn't felt that in years, but the sterile, overcooked hum of machinery bleeding into his skin. It seeped through him like molten glass poured into a mold, filling cracks that hadn't existed before he died. He could hear the machines before he could open his eyes, low, predatory, a chorus of metallic breathing. His eyelids twitched. The world seeped in piece by piece. A white ceiling stained the yellow of old nicotine. Hairline cracks spiderwebbed across it. Water damage formed sprawling maps above him, rivers branching into veins, continents that only the dead might chart. Somewhere outside, the cry of a siren warbled, then Dopplered away, swallowed by the omnipresent drone of the city. He tried to swallow. His throat caught on static. When his eyes focused, shapes emerged in the periphery, a rack of gleaming spines suspended on hooks, their chromed vertebrae catching light from a single flickering bulb, jars of milky nutrient gel cradling disembodied lungs, ocular arrays blinking weakly as if dreaming. The room reeked of coolant, antiseptic, and the faint, sharp tang of solder. "You're welcome," a voice said from somewhere beyond the bed. Arata turned his head. Pain spiked, not the clean agony of muscle tearing, but a discordant delay between movement and sensation, like his nerves were still negotiating a truce with whatever had replaced them. The man stood in shadow, surgical mask pulled low enough to expose a mouth lined with nicotine stains. His coat was a patchwork of grease-slick leather and synthetic fabric, stitched in a way that looked both improvised and disturbingly deliberate. His gloves dripped crimson onto the cracked tile. "You were dead," the man said. "Two through the chest, one through the neck. Somebody didn't just want you gone. They wanted you erased. Corporate job, I'd bet my license." Arata tried to answer, but his voice came out fractured, glitching like corrupted audio. The man, surgeon, scavenger, or something in between, tapped a console bolted to the wall. A wire-frame human body unfolded on a hazy display, its outline blinking in slow pulses. Most of it glowed faint crimson. A disturbing portion glowed the deep surgical blue of manufactured parts. "Had to get creative," the man said. "Your meat was too damaged to patch. So I replaced what I could. Bones, muscles, neural mesh, enough to get you walking and shooting again. You're faster now, tougher. Illegal as hell, but hey, so's breathing in this city." Arata stared at the diagram. A phantom pressure bloomed in his chest, where the bullets had torn through him, though he knew the flesh there was gone. The glowing red shapes on the diagram felt alien, like they belonged to someone else. "There's a catch," the man went on. "You're running on biochips now. Think of them like batteries, but grown inside augmented brains. They feed the mesh, keep your new systems from rotting. Trouble is, you can't buy them in a store. You have to take them. From other people. Augmented ones. And yeah, that means killing them." Arata didn't speak. Couldn't. The words settled into him like cold lead. The man stepped closer, his eyes flicking over Arata as though inspecting a custom build. "I don't care why you were killed. I just know the kind of man who survives in this city learns quick, eat or be eaten." Memories pushed through the haze, shards of them, rain on steel. A whisper in his ear. The whistleblower's terrified eyes just before the muzzle flash. His refusal, the way the world had snapped into black. His voice finally came, ragged, not entirely his own. "I didn't ask for this." The man's mouth curled in something like pity. Or maybe it was contempt. "Didn't ask for your death either, did you?" Silence filled the room. Beyond the door, footsteps splashed through wet pavement, fading into the night. Somewhere far below, the bass from a nightclub thumped through the floor like a giant's heartbeat. The man moved to a side table and picked up a small silver object, no bigger than a coin, its surface etched with intricate circuitry. He tossed it to Arata. "First one's free. You'll need it before the day's out." It pulsed faintly in his palm, heat threading into his veins. A strange, involuntary shiver went through him, a hunger blooming low in his chest. He swung his legs over the side of the bed. The floor was cold tile, slick under his bare feet. When he stood, the balance felt wrong, too steady, like the floor itself was adjusting to him. A cracked mirror leaned against the far wall. He walked toward it, each step accompanied by the quiet hiss of hydraulics hidden beneath muscle. The face staring back at him was his, and not his. Sharper jaw, faint scars where skin met chrome, and eyes that glimmered faintly with an overlay of scrolling data only he could see. On a chair sat a battered leather coat. He picked it up, the scent of rain and gunpowder clinging to it like an old memory. Beside it, a pistol, matte black, compact, neural-linked. Its weight felt natural in his hand, as if his new body had been built around it. The man in the shadows stepped back into his work, hands already deep in some other patient's torso. You're stable for now, but every hour that passes without a chip you degrade. Get moving. Outside, the city howled, a beast of steel and neon. Skyscrapers clawed at the sky, their edges swallowed by low clouds pulsing with light. Hover traffic streamed between them like schools of predatory fish. Every alley breathed steam, every corner whispered in languages Arata hadn't heard in years. He stepped into it without hesitation. The rain hit him first, warm, chemical-laced, sliding down his coat in slow rivulets. Somewhere out there, the people who had left him to die were still walking, still breathing, still feeding at the top of the city's food chain. For now. He pulled the collar of his coat high, slid the pistol into the holster stitched into his ribs, and let the neon swallow him whole. Chapter 2. The first feed. The rain hadn't let up since Arata left the clinic. It rarely did here. The city liked to keep its streets wet, kept the neon sharp, made everything look expensive from a distance even if you were ankle-deep in trash water. He kept moving. His new body felt like wearing someone else's skin. Every step too smooth, too precise, his balance almost predatory. The systems embedded in his nervous network kept throwing ghost data at him. Distance readouts to streetlights, threat indicators flashing red over pedestrians whose cybernetics barely qualified as aftermarket toys. His vision shifted in layers, baseline reality, infrared silhouettes, movement prediction arcs curling like smoke. It would have been intoxicating if he wasn't so aware of the gnawing inside his chest. The silver biochip from the surgeon still pulsed faintly in his pocket. Even without touching it, he could feel it, like a hot coal suspended in the air near his ribs. His new hardware kept pinging for more, a deep, low-frequency hunger. He didn't just need food anymore. He needed fuel. And fuel had to be taken. Arata ducked into a narrow market alley, the kind that wound between older city blocks before vanishing into dead ends. Vendors squatted behind oil drum braziers, selling skewers of meat that hissed in the rain, the scent of soy and spice barely covering the stink of standing water. Augmented street preachers shouted sermons about the coming digital ascension, their chrome-plated limbs flashing under the dripping awnings. His optics tagged people without asking, overlaying percentages of cybernetic integration above their heads, estimating chip efficiency, even flashing threat assessments in yellow or red. Most were useless to him. Low-grade prosthetics, bootleg neural uplinks with lifespans measured in months. The surgeon's words kept echoing. From other people, augmented ones. And yeah, that means killing them. He stopped at the far end of the market. Beyond a chain-link fence, a loading yard sprawled under dim floodlights, puddles reflecting the shapes of cargo drones drifting overhead. And there, leaning against a stack of crates, was opportunity. Target acquired. The overlay on the man lit red. Biochip type, Class 3 neural regulator. EST, output, 98%, perfect. The man was tall, wearing a combat-grade exosuit under his coat. A faint glow leaked from the seams at his wrists and neck, and Arata could hear the servo motors in his limbs, the low purr of capacitors charging when he shifted his weight. Ex-military maybe, hired muscle. Two other mercs paced nearby, armed with compact shotguns and sporting visible arm enhancements. They looked bored, which meant they were sloppy. Arata's systems fed him options: stealth breach from the south wall, suppressed pistol to the guard on the left, knife to the right, then close range on the target. But another part of his brain, one that wasn't entirely his anymore, wanted something faster, cleaner, hungrier. He circled the block, found a rusted fire escape clinging to the side of a tenement. His grip strength was inhuman now. He scaled it in seconds, barely making a sound. From the rooftop, the yard unfolded like a board game. The rain softened as it hit the upper levels, becoming a mist that blurred the glow of the floodlights. He crouched, pulled the pistol free. Neural link engaged. He could feel the weapon in his palm as if it were another limb. Its targeting reticle hovered in his vision, synced perfectly with the twitch of his finger. One breath in, one out. The first guard dropped before he even knew what hit him. A muffled snap in the dark, his body crumpling into a puddle. The second turned, shotgun rising, but Arata was already moving. A leap from the rooftop to the stacked crates, the shock absorbers in his legs eating the landing. He hit the man from behind, one arm clamping over his mouth, the other driving the knife into the soft seam between cybernetic shoulder and human neck. The target, Class 3. Neural regulator was fast. His exosuit hissed as it amplified his lunge, the arm-mounted blade slicing the air where Arata had been. The man's eyes flared gold as he activated a combat HUD, tracking Arata's movements through the mist. But Arata wasn't fighting like a man. His systems mapped every micro-shift of muscle in the target's body, predicting the next attack before it began. The blade passed harmlessly over his ducking shoulder. He drove his elbow into the man's ribs once, twice, and felt servos crack under the impact. The man staggered, suit whirring to recalibrate. Arata closed the distance, pistol pressed to the side of his helmet. One shot, point blank. The visor shattered inward, spraying glass and blood. The body sagged against him, twitching. Then came the hunger. He knelt, fingers working quickly. At the base of the skull, just above the spinal integration port, the biochip pulsed faintly, encased in a sheath of synthetic cartilage. It was still warm when he twisted it free. The world tilted. His systems flared green. Fuel acquired. For a moment he just stood there, breathing hard. The chip throbbed against his palm, and without conscious thought, he slotted it into the port beneath his left collarbone. Heat bloomed through him, flooding his limbs, sharpening the edges of reality until every droplet of rain hung in the air like glass beads. It felt good, too good. The rest of the yard was silent, except for the patter of rain. Somewhere in the market beyond the fence, music thumped faintly from a street bar. Arata holstered his weapon, his coat heavy with rainwater and blood. As he slipped back into the alley, his reflection caught in a broken puddle. The man looking back wasn't the one who had walked into that yard. There was something sharper in the eyes now, something that didn't care about justice. The hunger was quieter, but it was still there, waiting. Chapter 3. Blood in the rain. The rain followed him. It wasn't just the weather. Rain was the city's constant mood, seeping into every crack, every neon reflection, coating the skin until you couldn't tell if you were wet from the sky or from the sweat of running too long. Arata moved through the narrow arteries of the city like a shadow, his coat heavy, his steps leaving ripples and puddles painted in the glow of 100 signs. The chip he'd taken pulsed faintly in his chest, not just powering his systems, but whispering. It wasn't sound, more like a sensation at the edge of thought, an addictive hum threading through his veins. Every surface looked sharper now. Every sound carried deeper meaning. A hoverbike screamed overhead, its thrusters cutting a wake in the mist. A conversation half a block away popped into clarity, voices distorted by static as someone argued over a bad data transfer. His senses didn't just serve him anymore. They pulled at him, urging him toward new heat signatures, new surges of electromagnetic activity. It was hunting instinct, wired directly into his brain. He took refuge in a place called the Chromed Lung, a bar wedged between two hollow advertising towers, its flickering signage coughing out light like an old neon throat trying to clear itself. The bouncer didn't bother scanning him. He knew better. Augmented eyes tracked Arata's approach, then slid away as if the man had just decided the weather outside was more interesting. Inside, smoke hung in layers, half from cheap cigarettes, half from the dry ice mist the owner insisted made the place look classy. Music leaked from battered wall speakers, slow synth, the kind that filled the empty space between heartbeats. People were everywhere. Mercenaries still in their armor, data couriers with eyes replaced by blank chrome panels, a few high-end corporate types slumming it to feel dangerous. Most of them were augmented to some degree. Arata's overlay tagged each one automatically, floating small icons above their heads. 90% junk hardware, 5% good enough to keep, 5% worth killing for. He ignored the red tags for now. Sliding into a booth at the back, he let his coat drip onto the cracked leather seat. The chip's warmth in his chest was fading, not fast enough to worry, but enough to remind him it wouldn't last. He ordered a drink from a passing server. No alcohol, just a stim blend strong enough to make his augmented veins buzz. The door hissed open, and that was when he saw her. Not Kira. Not yet. He didn't know her name. But the girl who would be her was standing in the doorway, scanning the room like she was trying to memorize every face. She couldn't have been more than 19, lean, wearing a hooded jacket too big for her frame, hands stuffed into the pockets like she didn't trust them not to fidget. Augmented? Barely. His overlay flagged a minor cranial interface. Cheap, probably self-installed. No real threat, no real reward. But her eyes were sharp, darting over each cluster of patrons with calculation that didn't fit her age. She spotted someone near the bar, a rat-faced man in a corporate courier's vest, and made her way over. Arata's attention wandered back to his drink, but something about the way she moved stuck with him. Not a mercenary's stride, not a corporate limp. She walked like someone who knew how to blend in, but wasn't yet good enough at it. Half an hour later, the courier stumbled out of the bar alone. The girl didn't follow. Arata filed it away without meaning to. His drink gone, he stepped back into the street. The night was thick with noise now. Vendor stalls spilling drunken laughter, music leaking from half-open doors, the wet crunch of traffic over rain-slick pavement. Arata headed east, toward the sector called Underline, a stretch of the city's spine where old maglev lines ran parallel to street level. The rails hadn't carried passengers in years, but the abandoned platforms and tunnels had become a marketplace for everything the city pretended didn't exist. He moved like he belonged here because he did. A man in a respirator mask waved him toward a stall selling stripped-down drones. Another offered a rack of polymer knives guaranteed to pierce even military-grade armor. Arata ignored them both. His systems had started to ping again, not urgently, but like a distant hunger returning from sleep. It was there, at the far end of Underline, that he saw his next target. A woman leaning against a graffiti-sprayed column, cigarette glowing faintly in the mist. Her hair was shaved on one side, the other falling in a silver sheet down her shoulder. Augmented spine, visible under the slit in her leather jacket, feeding into both arms. One hand clutched a cheap pistol, the other toyed with a data shard the size of a thumbnail. The overlay pulsed red. Biochip type, Class 2 motor augmenter. ST. Output, 86%. Not as good as the last one, but enough to keep him running another night. She clocked him before he'd even crossed half the distance. Eyes narrowing. Her posture shifted, cigarette dropping into a puddle with a hiss. "You here to trade or to steal?" she asked, voice edged with static. "Neither," Arata said, stepping into the shadow between two flickering floodlights. Her hand twitched toward the pistol. He moved first. A burst forward, coat flaring, his systems boosting speed in short, violent pulses. She got one shot off, wide, before his hand clamped over her gun wrist, twisting hard. Bone popped under augmented tension. She hissed, her free hand striking out with the shard like a blade, but he caught that too, smashing it against the column. She fought like a cornered animal, but the fight drained fast when he slammed her against the wall, pinning her with his weight. One quick strike to the neck, calibrated to shut her down without killing her outright, and she went limp. He worked quickly, fingers finding the access port at the base of her skull, twisting until the chip came free. When it slid into his collarbone port, heat bloomed again, sharper this time, his vision sharpening until he could see the individual raindrops caught in the air like frozen beads of glass. The hunger recoiled, sated, for now. By the time he left Underline, the woman was gone, her limp body no doubt dragged away by scavengers looking for scraps. The rain hadn't slowed, and the city was still alive with the restless pulse of a million transactions, threats, and lies. Somewhere in all of it, that girl from the bar was probably walking her own dangerous path. He didn't know yet how close theirs would come to crossing. But the hunger would make sure of it. Chapter 4. The Job. The rain had become a constant percussion, hitting the rooftops in sync with the thump of bass leaking from the undercity. Arata had stopped caring if his coat was wet. The synthetic fibers dried in minutes anyway, and he'd learned that the smell of wet leather made people step aside faster in the crowd. It had been 3 nights since Underline. The chip from the woman by the graffiti column was still keeping his systems at a steady hum, but already he could feel the fade, like gravity slowly returning after a brief suspension. His body craved the next rush, his mind rationalizing the hunt before the hunger even made itself known. He told himself it was survival, that without the chips he'd lock up and rot in some alley. But the truth was becoming harder to ignore. He liked the moment. The instant the chip slid into his port and the world bent around him, edges sharpening, sounds layering in crystalline clarity. It was a high without equal, and he didn't just need it. He wanted it. He sat in a corner of the chromed lung, same booth as before, nursing a stim drink laced with neurocaffeine. The smoke was thicker tonight, curling in lazy spirals that caught in the shafts of light bleeding through the slats in the ceiling. Augmented voices filled the air, some glitching on damaged vocal mods, others modulated into silk-smooth tones no human could produce naturally. The door hissed open. That girl again. She wore the same oversized jacket, hood down this time, hair cut shorter, jagged, probably by her own hand, and dark enough to disappear into the shadows. Her movements were quicker tonight, more purposeful, like she was running on adrenaline. Arata didn't intend to watch her, but she had a way of drawing the eye. Not because she was loud, quite the opposite. It was the calculated invisibility, the way she used other people's motion as cover, moving in their wake without touching them. She slid into a booth near the bar, not ordering, just watching the crowd. Her gaze snagged on a man at the far end, a tall, broad-shouldered brute in a patchwork armored vest. Arata's overlay pinged him immediately. Biochip type, Class 2 Spinal Stabilizer, EST, output, 74%. Not worth the trouble for Arata, but maybe worth something else to her. He looked away. An hour later, the brute left with a woman in a silver raincoat. Arata saw the girl's eyes follow him out, saw the way her jaw tightened. She didn't move until a minute later, slipping out the door in their wake. Arata's drink was nearly gone, but his curiosity wasn't. He waited 2 minutes, then left too. Outside, the air was thick with wet haze. The neon here was softer, muted by mist, bleeding colors into each other until the signs seemed to melt in place. He found her 2 blocks away, crouched in a narrow alcove, jacked into a public access panel. Her fingers moved fast over the cracked touchscreen, eyes darting between lines of scrolling code. The panel's outer casing had been forced open, wires pulled and spliced into a small black box at her feet. "You've got a window of maybe 90 seconds before security sweeps this block," Arata said. She didn't look up. "Then stop talking and move along. You tailing that brute from the bar?" That got him a glance, quick, assessing. "You watching me?" "Maybe." She went back to her work, muttering something under her breath. The screen flashed green, then she yanked the device free, stuffing it into her jacket pocket. "Hope whatever you pulled was worth it," Arata said. "It will be." She started to leave, then paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. You're running some heavy-grade mods, not off-the-shelf stuff. Black market rebuild? He didn't answer. She gave a short, humorless laugh. Guess we both like our secrets. Then she was gone, swallowed by the mist. Arata didn't follow, but something about the encounter stuck with him. Not the details, but the impression. She wasn't just some street rat skimming creds. She was doing something deliberate, and deliberate people had a way of showing up again. By the time he returned to his rented capsule in the Stack district, it was nearly dawn. The Stack was a vertical graveyard of old housing units welded onto each other until they resembled skyscrapers made of rust. Elevators hadn't worked in years. Residents used the skeletal scaffolding to climb between floors. Arata's capsule was barely big enough for the cot, the weapons locker, and a wall-mounted terminal. He was halfway to removing his coat when the terminal pinged. Incoming encrypted message, no sender ID. The text read, "Job offer, high payout, you're being recommended. Meet at Dock 9 South Trench, 20 o'clock. Bring your own hardware." South Trench wasn't the kind of place you went for casual business. It was Deepport territory, an undersea docking hub for cargo subs and smuggling vessels controlled by whatever mercenary outfit had the muscle to claim it that month. He didn't reply, but he also didn't delete the message. Night came fast in South Trench. The dock was a cavern of rusted steel and hanging cables, lit by swinging sodium lamps that painted everything in dirty orange. The smell of salt water fought with diesel fumes and the acrid tang of welding arcs. A crew was waiting near the edge of the platform, their leader, a woman with carbon fiber plating under her skin and an assault rifle slung casually over her shoulder. "You're Arata," she said, not a question. "We've heard you're efficient." "That depends on the job. Corporate hit, extraction and cleanup. In and out in under 12 minutes. You'll get the target details on site. Pays enough to keep you swimming in chips for months." Her crew watched him without blinking. All augmented, all armed. Arata thought of the hunger, of the red tags his overlay would paint over each of their heads if he let it. He thought of the girl in the alley, working with deliberate hands, pulling something valuable from the network, like a pearl from deep water. "I'm in," he said. The leader's smile was all teeth. "Good. We leave in 2 days. Don't be late." The rain was still falling when he left the dock, the city ahead a vertical sprawl of shadow and light. Somewhere in its labyrinth, someone was about to die for corporate profit, and Arata was about to get paid for it. But more than that, he was about to feed again. Chapter 4. The Job. The rain had become a constant percussion, hitting the rooftops in sync with the thump of bass leaking from the undercity. Arata had stopped caring if his coat was wet. The synthetic fibers dried in minutes anyway, and he'd learned that the smell of wet leather made people step aside faster in the crowd. It had been 3 nights since Underline. The chip from the woman by the graffiti column was still keeping his systems at a steady hum, but already he could feel the fade, like gravity slowly returning after a brief suspension. His body craved the next rush, his mind rationalizing the hunt before the hunger even made itself known. He told himself it was survival, that without the chips he'd lock up and rot in some alley. But the truth was becoming harder to ignore. He liked the moment. The instant the chips slid into his port and the world bent around him, edges sharpening, sounds layering in crystalline clarity. It was a high without equal, and he didn't just need it. He wanted it. He sat in a corner of the chromed lung, same booth as before, nursing a stim drink laced with neurocaffeine. The smoke was thicker tonight, curling in lazy spirals that caught in the shafts of light bleeding through the slats in the ceiling. Augmented voices filled the air, some glitching on damaged vocal mods, others modulated into silk-smooth tones no human could produce naturally. The door hissed open. That girl again. She wore the same oversized jacket, hood down this time, hair cut shorter, jagged, probably by her own hand, and dark enough to disappear into the shadows. Her movements were quicker tonight, more purposeful, like she was running on adrenaline. Arata didn't intend to watch her, but she had a way of drawing the eye. Not because she was loud, quite the opposite. It was the calculated invisibility, the way she used other people's motion as cover, moving in their wake without touching them. She slid into a booth near the bar, not ordering, just watching the crowd. Her gaze snagged on a man at the far end, a tall, broad-shouldered brute in a patchwork armored vest. Arata's overlay pinged him immediately. Biochip type. Class 2 spinal stabilizer. SD, output, 74%. Not worth the trouble for Arata, but maybe worth something else to her. He looked away. An hour later, the brute left with a woman in a silver raincoat. Arata saw the girl's eyes follow him out, saw the way her jaw tightened. She didn't move until a minute later, slipping out the door in their wake. Arata's drink was nearly gone, but his curiosity wasn't. He waited 2 minutes, then left too. Outside, the air was thick with wet haze. The neon here was softer, muted by mist, bleeding colors into each other until the signs seemed to melt in place. He found her 2 blocks away, crouched in a narrow alcove, jacked into a public access panel. Her fingers moved fast over the cracked touchscreen, eyes darting between lines of scrolling code. The panel's outer casing had been forced open, wires pulled and spliced into a small black box at her feet. "You've got a window of maybe 90 seconds before security sweeps this block," Arata said. She didn't look up, then stopped talking and move along. "You tailing that brute from the bar?" That got him a glance, quick, assessing. "You watching me?" "Maybe." She went back to her work, muttering something under her breath. The screen flashed green, then she yanked the device free, stuffing it into her jacket pocket. "Hope whatever you pulled was worth it," Arata said. "It will be." She started to leave, then paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You're running some heavy-grade mods, not off-the-shelf stuff. Black market rebuild?" He didn't answer. She gave a short, humorless laugh. "Guess we both like our secrets." Then she was gone, swallowed by the mist. Arata didn't follow, but something about the encounter stuck with him. Not the details, but the impression. She wasn't just some street rat skimming creds. She was doing something deliberate. And deliberate people had a way of showing up again. By the time he returned to his rented capsule in the Stack district, it was nearly dawn. The Stack was a vertical graveyard of old housing units welded onto each other until they resembled skyscrapers made of rust. Elevators hadn't worked in years. Residents used the skeletal scaffolding to climb between floors. Arata's capsule was barely big enough for the cot, the weapons locker, and a wall-mounted terminal. He was halfway to removing his coat when the terminal pinged. Incoming encrypted message, no sender ID. The text read, "Job offer, high payout. You're being recommended. Meet at Dock 9 South Trench, 20 o'clock. Bring your own hardware." South Trench wasn't the kind of place you went for casual business. It was Deepport territory. An undersea docking hub for cargo subs and smuggling vessels, controlled by whatever mercenary outfit had the muscle to claim it that month. He didn't reply, but he also didn't delete the message. Night came fast in South Trench. The dock was a cavern of rusted steel and hanging cables, lit by swinging sodium lamps that painted everything in dirty orange. The smell of salt water fought with diesel fumes and the acrid tang of welding arcs. A crew was waiting near the edge of the platform, their leader, a woman with carbon fiber plating under her skin and an assault rifle slung casually over her shoulder. "You're Arata," she said. "Not a question. We've heard you're efficient. That depends on the job. Corporate hit. Extraction and cleanup. In and out in under 12 minutes. You'll get the target details on site. Pays enough to keep you swimming in chips for months." Her crew watched him without blinking. All augmented, all armed. Arata thought of the hunger, of the red tags his overlay would paint over each of their heads if he let it. He thought of the girl in the alley, working with deliberate hands, pulling something valuable from the network like a pearl from deep water. "I'm in," he said. The leader's smile was all teeth. "Good. We leave in 2 days. Don't be late." The rain was still falling when he left the dock. The city ahead, a vertical sprawl of shadow and light. Somewhere in its labyrinth, someone was about to die for corporate profit. and Arata was about to get paid for it. But more than that, he was about to feed again. Chapter 5. Breach Protocol. The elevator shuddered to a halt with a hiss of hydraulics and the low, grinding groan of steel settling into steel. Inside, the mercenary crew stood shoulder to shoulder, an uneasy silence hanging between them. The hum of the fluorescent strip above flickered against polished alloy armor, and visors streaked with old rainwater stains. Arata kept to the rear corner, his arms folded loosely, eyes scanning the chrome interior, noting every twitch of movement. They were 5 floors beneath the glittering surface of Neon City, buried in the security artery of Kazuma Dynamics arcology. From here, everything funneled inward. Data, money, blood. 1,000 kilometers of fiber lines and power conduits ran behind these walls like veins under skin. They weren't here for the bones, though. They were here for the heart. 2 minutes to breach, rasped Jin, the crew leader. His voice modulated through a throat implant that made every word sound like sand poured over concrete. He wore a dented exo-harness bolted directly into his spine, pistons hissing with each movement. His eyes, both cybernetic, swept across them, stopping briefly on Arata. Arata gave him nothing back. Silence was armor. The elevator doors parted with a sterile chime. Beyond was a white-lit corridor that felt wrong in the way a morgue did. Too clean, too cold, the air biting with recycled antiseptic. Their boots thudded against matte composite flooring, footsteps swallowed by sound-dampening walls. Arata could feel the hidden sensors tracing them, each microsecond of biometric analysis feeding into some security AI upstairs. The target room lay 50 meters ahead, the vault. It wasn't a physical storage vault in the old sense, no gold bars or bundles of cash. This was where the megacorp kept its encrypted prototypes, black budget schematics, and whatever else was worth more than the lives of everyone in this corridor. The vault door loomed at the end like an unblinking eye, 3 meters high, smooth alloy surface unbroken, except for a palm-width recess at chest height. Payload, Jin said, nodding to Cade, the crew's breacher. She stepped forward, a cybernetic frame glinting under her coat, and slapped a matte black device onto the recess. It clung magnetically, a faint hum swelling into a low throb that seemed to rattle in Arata's teeth. He'd seen vaults like this before. Corporate paranoia turned into architecture. If you wanted in without the key, you had to melt through 4 separate locking protocols simultaneously. That meant EMP shielding, anti-kinetic plating, and encryption built by paranoid minds with infinite budgets. Coyote's rig was cutting through it like butter. 30 seconds, she murmured. Jin shifted his weight, his hand resting on the stock of his coil rifle. Remember, he said, looking at Arata again, no extra bodies unless it's necessary. Arata didn't nod, didn't smirk, just let the words dissolve into the recycled air. Necessary was such a slippery word. A ripple passed through the corridor. No, through him. His augments prickled, feeding him sensor echoes from the building's systems. Someone was coming. Fast. He stepped away from the wall just as the first security drone swung around the corner, sleek, black, insect-like, 6 jointed legs clattering against the floor. Twin optics flared red. The drone didn't have time to speak or scan. Arata was already moving. The blade slid out from his wrist in a clean whisper of metal, curved and single-edged, catching the light like a shard of moon. 1 step forward, pivot, arc of motion, optics split, sparks coughed into the air. The drone collapsed in 3 twitching pieces. The rest came in a flood. 4 more rounded the corner, their rifles swiveling. Arata heard the high-pitched whine of charging capacitors. Behind him, the vault hummed louder, the breach device nearly there. The firefight was brief and brutal. Jin's coil rifle punched through 2 drones in a flash of violet arcs. Kairi, without looking up from the device, flicked her wrist and loosed a pair of micro-grenades that bloomed with magnetic shockwaves, sending the machine skittering into walls. Arata moved like a shadow in turbulence, cutting through chassis and cabling, feeling the hot stutter of his own systems drinking in the electric residue. Done, Katie announced. The vault door split with a sigh, parting down the middle. Cold light spilled out. Inside, the walls were studded with racks of crystal storage arrays, each one humming faintly, their pale glow reflected in the crew's wide eyes. Jin stepped in first, scanning with a portable reader. Grab rows 3 through 5. Leave the rest. They worked fast, pulling crystalline slabs from their slots, packing them into shielded cases. Every piece stolen was worth more than a block of high-rise real estate topside. Arata moved with them, but his eyes weren't on the arrays. They were on the corner of the room, where a human-shaped figure sat slumped in a chair, head bowed. An augmented guard, alive. He could see the faint flicker of power still feeding into the man's systems, the faint data pulse that told him there was a biochip in there. A rare one. Expensive. His throat tightened with a hunger that wasn't hunger at all. His fingers flexed. Arata, Jin's voice cut in. Leave him. We're on a clock. But the hum was in his bones now. He could almost feel the chip sinking with his implants, promising speed, strength, clarity. The man in the chair stirred faintly, a twitch of awareness. The rest of the crew didn't see the blur of movement. One moment Arata was standing across the room, the next he was kneeling beside the guard, hand on the man's head, blade sliding in with surgical precision. A shudder passed through them both as Arata's systems drank the chip dry, integrating it into his own circuitry. When he rose, his irises were flickering faintly, like the lights outside when a grid transformer blew. Jin's stare was cold steel, but he said nothing, just jerked his head toward the door. We're out. They vanished into the corridor, hauling cases heavy with stolen futures, the vault's alarms now beginning to wake. Behind them, the slumped body cooled in the antiseptic air. And inside Arata's skull, the city seemed to slow, every sound crisper, every heartbeat sharper. The chip was singing to him, and the song was beautiful. Chapter 6. The Judas Circuit. The vault breach had been loud, far too loud for the kind of job that was supposed to leave no trace. The plan had been surgical. Slip in, copy the prototype schematics, vanish into the arteries of the city before the megacorp's immune system kicked in. But somewhere between the elevator shaft and the security core, something had gone wrong. Arata could smell it. Burned polymer, hot metal, the tang of overclocked servos failing under stress. He'd been in too many ops not to recognize the scent of a trap. The Merc crew, all tattoos, chrome jaws, and rented bravado, had been whispering about payouts and upgrades on the ride in. Now they were whispering nothing at all. The first one dropped in the sub-level corridor, no sound except a muffled thud, then a hiss of hydraulic failure. Arata turned in time to see an arc-scorched hole in the back of the man's neck. Whoever had designed this kill zone knew augmentation layouts. Kira's voice buzzed in his ear. They're inside the security net. 4 signatures. You've got 30 seconds before... The hallway lit with muzzle flashes. 4 heavies in full-plate corporate combat shells emerged from the smoke, rifles vomiting tungsten slugs. The mercs scattered, most of them screaming, a few returning fire. It was a slaughter from the first burst. Arata dropped to one knee, let the round stitch the air above him, then lunged. His left arm, still mostly organic but wired with tendon enhancers, hooked the leg of the nearest suit, yanking it off balance. His right arm, the black market polymer carbon composite one, punched through the plating at the joint seam. The armor screamed like a living thing as he ripped free the servo cluster, sparks and blood spraying. The chip pulsed. He felt it through his palm even before it came free, the low, rhythmic hum of living code. He shoved it into the port under his collarbone, and the rush hit. For a moment, the entire world ran smooth. His reflex latency halved, his optical feed sharpening until he could count the droplets of coolant falling from the ceiling. The rush always came with the whisper, though. A subtle voice at the edge of his thoughts that was not his own. Sometimes it sounded like him. Sometimes not. More. He obliged. By the time the smoke cleared, 3 corporate shells lay open like gutted fish. 2 mercs were down. One of them Jax, the one who'd made him laugh on the ride in. The chip in Jax's neck wasn't rare, wasn't high grade. But Arata's HUD was flashing warnings, overclock, heat, burn risk. He looked down at Jax, saw the fear giving way to relief, saw the understanding. You? Jax started. Arata drove his fingers into the base of his skull. The chip was bitter, unclean, but it would keep him moving, and that was all that mattered now. Kira's voice came again, softer, slower. Arata, the feed. You. The line cut. He was already moving, stepping over the dead toward the vault doors, chip heat still in his veins. Somewhere in this building was the data they'd come for. Somewhere was the reason someone had sold them out. But right now, the only thing that mattered was getting out alive. Alive enough to keep hunting. Chapter 7. A face in the static. The rain in District 6 didn't fall. It hung. It clung to the air like oil smoke, too heavy to properly descend, beating on glass and synth skin alike before rolling away like quicksilver. The streets here had no clear edges, only gradients. Wet asphalt bleeding into drainage canals, concrete melting into rust-stained scaffolding. Arata moved through it without hurry, though his pulse still hadn't settled from the vault job. Every step felt wired, his muscles twitching with the ghost memory of combat. The latest chip sat warm under his collarbone, still sending occasional tremors of extrasensory clarity through his nervous system. He'd arranged the meeting with Kira in one of the few places in 6 that wasn't drowning in noise. A derelict tram station 3 levels down from street grade. Corporate patrols ignored it. Too damp, too open, too hard to monitor. That was why he liked it. She was already there when he arrived. Kira sat on the rusted bench, her boots propped on an overturned caution sign, jacket collar pulled high against the drizzle. For weeks, she'd been just a voice. Sharp, amused, impatient. The voice of someone who had seen every lie before and knew exactly how to cut it in half. Seeing her in the flesh was like watching an image resolve from static. Short hair dyed deep violet at the tips, eyes that didn't quite match, one warm brown, the other with a faint cybernetic ring that caught the dim light. "You're late," she said, as if she'd been counting the seconds. "Had to make sure I wasn't being followed," Arata replied, scanning the shadows before stepping closer. She smirked. "You were being followed. You lost them 2 blocks back." He raised an eyebrow. "You were watching?" Her smirk deepened. "I'm always watching." Up close, she radiated the kind of composure Arata associated with people who knew how to vanish in a crowd without moving. Her gaze flicked over him, noting the fresh scuffs on his coat, the faint hitch in his breathing. "You took more than 1 chip," she said flatly. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was its own admission. "You keep burning hot like that, and it won't be long before your head isn't your own," she added, tone lighter but eyes sharp. Arata leaned against the wall opposite her. "The alternative was not making it out. I chose the option with a pulse." "That's one way to phrase cannibalizing a teammate," she said without flinching. He let the words hang. For a long time, the only sound was the slow drip of rain through the broken skylight. Somewhere in the distance, a mag rail train roared past, sending a vibration through the old steel bones of the station. Finally, she stood, closing the distance between them with a few casual steps. She was shorter than he'd expected, but there was a gravity to her presence that made the space between them feel taut. "I've got something for you," she said, sliding a wafer-thin shard of translucent polymer from her jacket. Embedded circuitry pulsed faintly within, like veins under skin. He took it. "What is it?" "An address," she said. "Encrypted. You'll need a key from someone I trust even less than I trust you. But if you want to know who sold you out in that vault, this is where you start." He turned the shard over in his hand. "And you're giving this to me. Why?" Her smile this time was small, almost tired. "Because if you find out who it was, you'll kill them. And that saves me the trouble." There was no mistaking the truth in her tone. He slid the shard into his coat pocket. "Then I guess we're working together now." "Working together," she echoed, though it sounded more like a test than an agreement. As she turned to leave, she glanced back once, eyes glinting in the gloom. One more thing. Next time you take a chip, make sure it's worth the piece of yourself you're selling. Otherwise, you're just another revenant waiting to burn out. She was gone before he could respond, her silhouette swallowed by the mist. Arata stayed a moment longer, feeling the weight of the shard in his pocket. Somewhere, someone was cashing in on his survival, and he had no intention of letting them keep the change. Chapter 8. Burn Patterns. The elevator doors hissed open on the 49th floor of the Matsuda K Biotech Tower, spilling Arata and Kira into a space that didn't belong to the public. No reception desk, no potted plants, just a cavernous expanse of polished black floor, lit by suspended neon grids, humming faintly like insect wings. Rows of refrigerated server racks glowed behind glass walls, their shifting lights mapping the heartbeat of the city's most dangerous experiments. Kira pulled her hood lower over her augmented eyes, scanning for cameras. "Two blind spots, northwest corner," she murmured. "You keep them distracted, I'll ghost the feeds." Arata nodded, adjusting the fit of his jacket to hide the matte black barrel of his pistol. The high vantage let him see the city's lights through the glass walls, streets running like veins under the rain, hollow billboards pulsing with propaganda. Down there, life went on. Up here, secrets decided who got to keep it. They'd taken the job because it was supposed to be a data grab. Steal a list of Matsuda K's black contracts, dump it to the undernet, watch the corp scramble. But the deeper Kira dug, the more she suspected the data had a physical element, a pattern embedded in stolen biochip firmware, burned into proprietary hardware. The kind of thing you couldn't just copy, you had to physically pull. The first guards they encountered were built for intimidation. Heavy cybernetic frames, dermal plating, eyes glowing faintly white. They stood at attention outside a climate-controlled vault door. Arata's instincts told him they weren't just watching. They were scenting. "You're about to make this loud, aren't you?" Kira whispered, sliding into the shadows of a server bay. "I don't make noise," Arata said, flexing his hand where the concealed blade was already warming against his palm. "I make statements." The first guard didn't even register surprise when Arata closed the distance in under 2 seconds, driving the blade between neck and collar implant. A bright spray of biofluid hit the black floor. The second guard reacted with mechanical precision, arm transforming into a shock baton. Arata twisted, absorbed the blow through reinforced ribs, and took him down with a triple strike: knee, throat, temple. The impact was surgical, the kind that felt like nothing until your systems realized they were shutting down. The smell of scorched polymer and blood filled the air. Arata crouched, fingers deftly finding the tiny slot at the base of the guard's skull. The biochip slid free with a faint click, glistening like a shard of molten glass. He hesitated for half a breath, then pressed it to the interface at the base of his own neck. It was like swallowing lightning. Code poured through his nervous system, rewriting pathways, tightening reflexes. Every time he swore he'd get used to it. Every time it still felt like drowning in another person's memories. Kira's voice pulled him back. "We're in, but, you're gonna want to see this." Inside the vault, the air was dry and bitter cold. Shelves of sleek black cases lined the walls, each labeled in delicate white script. Kira held up a device the size of her palm, its glassy surface showing a 3D model of a human brain, except the folds were wrong. Too symmetrical, too deliberate. "They're building pattern cognition," she said. "They're not just making cybernetics, they're printing minds. Programs designed to run inside augmented people. And this," she pointed to the lower quadrant, "is an active seed pattern. If they load this into someone, it's not just upgrades, it's a rewrite." Arata studied the model. He'd seen twisted cybernetics before, people rewired for loyalty, obedience, efficiency, but this was surgical, predatory. "How many?" he asked. "Hundreds, maybe more." That was when the emergency lights hit, sheets of crimson slicing across the black walls. The hum of the servers dropped an octave, replaced by the pounding thud of heavy boots in the stairwell. "You grab the pattern, I'll cover," Arata said, drawing his pistol. Kira moved fast, fingers dancing over a portable sequencer. Arata held the entryway, counting footfalls. He could feel the chip he'd just consumed sharpening his aim, pushing his peripheral vision wider, mapping each sound into a precise trajectory. The first wave of guards came in with kinetic shields. Arata used them against their owners, shoving one into another before snapping a third's neck. Every movement was clean, efficient. He didn't even notice how deep his breathing had dropped, how much it resembled the rhythm of the machines he fought. When Kira finally yanked the sequencer's cable and shoved the drive into her pocket, her eyes caught his. For just a second, he saw something flicker there. Not fear, not yet, but suspicion. They made it out the freight elevator, winded and dripping rain as they hit the street. Above them, the tower loomed, its lights pulsing like a heartbeat they hadn't managed to stop. Kira stuffed her hands in her pockets. "We're not just stealing from them anymore, are we?" Arata didn't answer. Because the truth was, somewhere in that fight, in the rush of the feed, in the way his body had moved without hesitation, he wasn't sure if he was still stealing for justice at all. Chapter 9. The Fracture. The rain had a way of making the city seem honest. It was the same old omni-shod skyline, steel spires veined with neon arteries, billboards burning color into the night. But when rain hit it, the veneer softened. The city looked less like a manufactured product and more like something alive gasping through the downpour. Somewhere in that maze, Kira was waiting for me. Somewhere in that maze, she was starting to realize what I really was. I kept replaying the way she'd looked at me after the last job, like she'd caught the scent of something rotting under the perfume. She didn't say it outright, but I could tell. The edges of my mask were slipping. We had another job tonight. A small one, by my standards. A data courier working for Etherdyne, transporting something worth enough to justify his life being collateral damage. Kira insisted on taking the lead, said she needed to prove she could run an upstart to finish. I let her, partly because I wanted to see her work, and partly because I needed to know how much she'd figured out. The rendezvous point was an overpass in Sector 12, the kind of place people forgot existed until they needed to dump a body. Rusted girders groaned in the wind, a train passed below, its mag rails hissing in protest. Kira stood there in her jacket, too big for her frame, hood pulled low, fingers ghosting over the interface ports at her wrist. She didn't look up when I approached, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed she'd heard me long before I said anything. "You're late," she said. "Traffic," I replied, voice dry. Her eyes flicked to mine, searching for some kind of truth before she turned back to her work. "Target's on foot. He thinks the courier net is compromised, so he's going analog. Paper data. Like it's the old days." "Easier to take," I said. "Easier to lose," she countered. We moved. The courier was just a man. No augment ports in sight. Hair plastered to his head from the rain. He carried a slim case like it was part of him, the strap crossing his chest. If Kira hadn't painted a target on him with her intel, I'd have walked past him without a second thought. She handled the tail. Perfect spacing, never once letting him catch her reflection in a window. I kept to the fringes, watching her work, every so often catching her glance in my direction, like she was checking I hadn't vanished entirely. When she made the grab, it was quick. A bump on the shoulder, a muttered curse, and her hand was already closing over the strap's latch. He turned, surprised, and I was there, my palm on his throat, pressing him against the wet brick of an alley wall. He tried to speak, but my grip cut him off. Kira's eyes widened. "Arata! I didn't kill him, not right away. I just leaned in, close enough that my optics scanned every micro-expression. He wasn't enhanced. No chip, just meat and fear. I let him drop." Kira shoved the case into my chest. "What the hell was that?" "Insurance," I said. "That wasn't the job." "No," I said and turned to leave. We took the case back to her safe house. She locked the door behind us, tension in every movement. The place smelled like solder and synth coffee, her workbench littered with half-assembled drones. She set the case on the table, fingers moving through the biometric locks. When it clicked open, the contents were underwhelming. A stack of folders, each marked with Etherdyne's sigil. Paper, just like she said. She picked one up, scanning it. Project Helios, she murmured. I didn't answer. My mind was somewhere else, somewhere hungrier. Arata, she said finally, setting the folder down. I saw what you did to Haynes, on the rooftop. You didn't just kill him. You took something from him. Same with Yvette. Same with Lorne. The room felt smaller. Her gaze was steady, but her voice was softer now. You've been feeding on them, haven't you? I didn't deny it. It's not what you think, I said. And even to me, the words sounded hollow. Her laugh was brittle. Not what I think? You're killing people for parts. That's not justice, Arata, that's… She cut herself off, like the word was too big to let into the air. I stepped closer and she didn't back away. I'm surviving. Every upgrade they gave me burns through bioprocessing power faster than my body can regenerate. Without chips, I shut down. Permanently. She shook her head. Then find another way. There is no other way. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The rain against the window was the only sound. Finally, she said, I can't be part of this if you keep doing it. I didn't tell her I wouldn't. Couldn't lie that cleanly anymore. The job was over. The partnership? Maybe not yet. But as I left her safe house that night, I knew the fracture was real. The city's rain felt colder on my skin. Somewhere in the neon shadows, my next target was already breathing their last days. And for the first time in months, the hunger felt sharper than the mission. Chapter 10. Surgical Strikes. The city felt smaller when you were hunting from the top down. From a rooftop 33 stories above Midtown sector, Arata watched the flow of humanity below like a cold current through neon-lit glass canyons. The high wind made his coat whip against the rail, the polymer weave snapping like a flag. Above him, a megacorp-owned blimp drifted silently, its sides looping, an ad for Augmentus Elevate the Human. The irony wasn't lost on him. Tonight was different from alleyway assassinations and smoky club kills. No messy crowds, no improvising with whatever broken bottle or sharpened edge came to hand. This was precise, surgical, coordinated. 3 targets. 3 keystones in the skyscraper foundation of echelon dynamics. Without them, the corporation would stumble, maybe fall. And when it fell, the whole city would feel the tremor. His comm pinged in his ear a soft pulse, Kira's signal. Visuals up, she murmured from her safe house miles away. Hollow data floated in Arata's vision, overlaid against the skyline. Target 1 Dr. Halverson, biochip development lead. His face hovered like a ghost, corporate smile hiding the fact that his research had led to at least 1,000 dead test subjects. Target 2. Elswith Roan, security systems architect. The woman's designs had turned entire apartment blocks into prison grids for quarantine. Target 3. Varric Ewan, head of supply chains. The man who funneled black market cyberware into cartel hands while smiling for charity galas. This won't be like the others, Kira said. These people are insulated. Private guards, automated defenses, airlocks on their penthouses. Doesn't matter, Arata replied, adjusting the grip on his suppressed flechette rifle. Everyone bleeds. Some just don't know it yet. Phase 1. Halverson. He caught the doctor leaving a biotech gala, his silver suit gleaming under street lamps. The motorcade idled, humming with electric engines. Arata moved like smoke, one shadow merging with another. He didn't fire from a distance. He stepped forward as the limo door opened, drove the flechette rifle's muzzle under Halverson's ribcage, and pulled the trigger once. The weapon's hiss was quieter than the doctor's startled breath. Arata dragged the body back, jamming an injector into the man's neck. The biochip extraction was swift, clinical, almost like a kiss, and then it was over. The limo driver never turned around. His augmented eyes stared forward, frozen, the signal jammer in Arata's pocket doing its job. Phase 2. Roan. Elswith Roan lived in a penthouse fortress atop Sector 9's East Spire. Automated turrets lined the balcony. Drones drifted like bored sharks between the glass walls. Kira looped the feeds for 47 seconds. That was all Arata needed. He ascended on the exterior service lifts, scaling cables slick with rain. At floor 69, he cut through the paneling, slipped inside, and found Roan in her private VR chamber. She sat suspended in a harness, lost in some simulated luxury island. The knife slid in clean, no gunfire, no alarms. He cradled her as she spasmed, her neural uplink still feeding her the sunset she thought she was watching. The chip extraction left her slumped like a puppet with cut strings. Phase 3. Ewan. The hardest one. Varric. Ewan moved constantly, from corporate safe house to armored limo to sky yacht. Arata caught him in a loading bay beneath the Corp's West Tower. Freight bots clattered past with sealed containers, some full of consumer goods, others full of parts that had no business outside military labs. They saw each other. Ewan wasn't armed, but his bodyguards were and augmented to hell. The firefight was thunder in steel corridors. Arata's rifle chattered, tearing through armor plating and flesh. Sparks lit the shadows as rounds ricocheted off crates. One guard lunged with a carbon blade, and Arata met him with a roundhouse that shattered servo motors in the man's leg. Yuen ran for the exit. Arata pursued, vaulting over a dying guard's body, landing hard enough to make the catwalk tremble. When Arata caught him, he didn't speak. He drove him into the wall, hard enough to dent the steel, then fed on the chip with a hunger that felt almost euphoric. By the time the three bodies were cold, the city below hadn't even noticed. Kira's voice was quiet in his ear. "It's done?" "Done," Arata said, wiping the rain from his visor. "Then the collapse starts now. You've cut out their brain, their nerves, and their lifeline." Arata looked down at the glow of the streets, the blimp still looping its promise of elevation. "And what happens when the city looks for someone to take their place?" Kira didn't answer. Arata knew the answer anyway. Chapter 11. Apex Predator. The city's skyline looked different from this height. Arata stood on the glass balcony of the Helix Spire's top floor, neon bleeding upward from the streets below like some slow electric tide. The air was thin here, sterile, filtered, expensive. His reflection in the glass showed the man he'd become. Chrome veins threading his neck, irises faintly luminescent, jawline sharpened by titanium implants. The upgrades no longer felt like intrusions. They felt natural, necessary. The Helix Megacorp had been at war with itself for weeks now. After Arata's surgical dismantling of its supply lines and data webs, the old hierarchy collapsed into backroom power plays and paranoia. Board members vanished. Key executives retired permanently. And now, the last obstacle was the CEO herself, Yara Kuroda. Arata wasn't storming in with a merc squad this time. This was personal. The elevator opened behind him, its chime muted by the plush silence of the penthouse. Kira stepped out first, wearing a coat stitched with shifting hollow patterns. She'd insisted on coming. He hadn't told her why. "Your heart rate's up," she said, glancing at the faint biometric overlay in her contact lenses. "That's not like you." Arata smirked without humor. "Tonight's the end game." Yara Kuroda's office was a monolith of black glass, its walls alive with panoramic feeds of the city, security grids, and market graphs. She was seated behind a desk that looked grown, not built, blackwood veined with faintly glowing circuitry. No guards, no visible weapons, just her. A glass of amber liquid in hand and eyes that looked like they could see 10 seconds into the future. "Mr. Yukinaga," she said, voice velvet over steel. "I expected you weeks ago." "You've been busy killing your own people," Arata replied. He stepped forward, the click of his boots echoing in the cavernous space. "Saves me the trouble." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You think you've been hunting me. You've been doing my work for me. Eliminating rivals, collapsing threats, making room at the top." It wasn't bravado. She was telling the truth. Every target he'd taken had shifted the balance of power toward her. He'd been her blade without knowing it. "You want the top?" she asked, standing now, walking toward him with the grace of someone who'd never had to run from anything. "Then take it." The biochip in her was different. He could sense it. His augmented senses hummed in the presence of something refined, something rare. The hunger stirred, curling through his veins like a live wire. Kira's voice cut in. Arata, don't! But the hunger drowned her out. Yara moved first, too fast for human eyes. Her arms split open at the seams, folding out twin carbon-edged blades. Arata met her halfway, his own augmentations igniting in a storm of overclocked reflexes and servos. The clash shattered the desk between them, splinters and sparks flying. She was strong, stronger than anyone he'd fought. Every blow carried the precision of an executioner and the weight of someone who'd paid for only the best upgrades money could buy. But she was still human enough to bleed. A slash across her abdomen spilled both blood and cold blue coolant. She staggered, still smiling even as she fell. Arata knelt over her, hand gripping her throat, the other sliding to the back of her neck where the chip sat like a pearl in the dark. "You'll be worse than me," she whispered. "I know," he said and took it. The surge hit like a detonation. His vision stretched into 1,000 layers. Heat, sound, data, every living heartbeat in a 10-block radius mapped in sharp detail. His muscles trembled with the sheer influx of processing power. When it was over, Yara was gone. Only her body remained, cooling on the floor. Kira stood by the door, pale. She didn't speak. Didn't have to. Arata looked out the window again, the city sprawling beneath him like prey. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was climbing. He was already at the top. Chapter 12. Ghost Crown. The Helix Spire felt different now. Not quieter. Silence had always been expensive here, but emptier, as if the air knew its owner was gone. Arata sat alone in Yara Kuroda's chair, leaning back until the leather whispered under him. The city's feeds shimmered across the panoramic wall screens, traffic nodes pulsing red, market tickers trembling, crime maps lighting up like constellations in motion. The chip in his skull kept whispering. Data flowed unasked for, stock market fluctuations, power grid shifts, the location of every armed security unit in the district. It didn't feel like information anymore. It felt like instinct. Kira paced behind him, her boots soundless on the glass floor. You didn't have to kill her. Arata didn't turn. She wouldn't have stepped aside. That's not the point. He finally looked at her, eyes faintly aglow. I've been running on someone else's terms for too long. First the street crews, then her. That ends tonight. Below, in the Undercity, Helix security teams had already begun eating each other alive. Departments split into factions, mid-level commanders declaring independence, taking whatever assets they could carry. It was the perfect breeding ground for someone willing to move fast and hit harder. Arata's comm implant chirped, an encrypted line only a handful of people could reach. He accepted. A voice he knew too well, Kale. The man who'd first sold him his black market reflex suite, and who had been quietly skimming from every deal Arata had ever run. Word is you're sitting in the Queen's chair, Kale said, amusement lacing his tone. That means you've inherited her debts, and her enemies. Arata didn't answer immediately. The hunger in his veins itched for an outlet. Tell them, he said finally. The crown's not for sale. Kale chuckled. Then they'll try to take it. Let them try. He cut the line and stood. His reflection in the glass looked sharper than he remembered, skin stretched tight over steel, a predator in a man's shape. Hours later, the first test came. A convoy of armored haulers, flying the sigil of the Crimson Vultures, rolled through Sector 19's freight corridor. They weren't subtle about it. Too many guns, too much noise. They were daring whoever sat in Yara's place to respond. Arata didn't send Helix troops. He went himself. The rain was coming down in hard, needle-fine sheets, the kind that bounced off his jacket in bursts of static hiss. The convoy came into view under the halo glow of a streetlight. He stepped into the road, unarmed, and waited. The lead hauler slowed, not because they recognized him, but because something in his stance said, "Don't test this." When the first gun barrel swung his way, Arata moved. The chip blurred time around him, every drop of rain hanging like glass beads in the air. He crossed the space between himself and the nearest truck in a single smooth surge. Hands found the seams in armor plating, tore it like paper. Men screamed. By the time the last hauler's engine cut out, the road was quiet again, save for the hiss of cooling metal and the rain's constant applause. No survivors, no mercy, just a message. When he returned to the Helix Spire, Kira was waiting in the penthouse, arms folded. "What's left of you now?" Arata didn't answer. He was already watching the city feeds again. The power vacuum wasn't a threat anymore. It was an invitation. Chapter 13. The Last Frequency. The city never truly slept, but tonight it listened. Sector after sector flickered under Arata's control. The Helix Spire thrummed with power routed directly through his implants. Every security camera, every automated checkpoint, every drone blade in the sky. The feeds flowed into him like veins to a heart. Somewhere deep in the Undercity, Kale had rallied the fragments. Vulture remnants, Helix defectors, mercenaries desperate enough to sell their souls twice. And at the center of it all, the Chorus, a ghost broadcast network older than Helix itself. The Chorus didn't speak, it sang. An encrypted carrier wave threaded into every signal path, rewriting systems at the firmware level. No one knew who had built it. But now it was Kale's weapon. Kira found Arata on the observation deck. Rain streaked across the glass like slow static. "They've lit the whole Undercity," she said. "You can't just brute force this. The Chorus will eat your neural link alive." Arata closed his eyes. He could feel it, an alien rhythm at the edge of his awareness, tapping against the firewalls in his skull. A song meant to pull him apart. "I'm not going to brute force it," he said. "Then how?" He turned to her, and there was something in his expression she hadn't seen in months. A shadow of the man before the chip. "You told me once I was more than this hardware. Time to prove it." The Undercity was a tangle of rusted overpasses and dripping neon. Arata moved through it without stealth. His enemies knew he was coming, and that was the point. Kale was waiting in the old maglev terminal, leaning against a dormant control console. His grin was all sharp edges. "You've gone full monarch, Arata. How's the view from the top?" "Temporary," Arata said. "Unless I kill you." Kale's eyes glittered. "I'm not your problem." He tapped a control pad, and the world went white. The Chorus flooded Arata's mind. Pure harmonic overload. Code as music, designed to bypass thought entirely. The chip in his skull screamed. Vision warped, colors bleeding into impossible gradients. For a heartbeat, he saw himself from the outside. A man alone in the rain, the crown on his head nothing but circuitry and bone. It would be so easy to let go. Instead, Arata reached past the chip, past the speed, the reflexes, the cold machine logic. He reached for something slower, more stubborn, the part of him that had survived long before he was upgraded, the kid who'd clawed his way out of the alleys without dying. He shaped that will into a counterpulse. Not elegant, not fast, but human, the Chorus faltered. When his vision cleared, Kale was on the floor, clutching his head, the control pad smoking. You burned it out," Kale gasped. Arata crouched beside him. "No, I silenced it." And then, almost gently, he snapped Kale's neck. By dawn, the city was his. The factions bent the knee or dissolved. The feeds in his skull hummed at a steady, obedient rhythm. Kira met him in the Spire's penthouse. "So this is it? You rule forever?" Arata looked out at the endless sprawl. The neon washed his face in cold color. "Nothing's forever," he said. "But while it lasts, no one takes this city from me." For the first time, the crown didn't feel like weight. It felt like skin. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Until next time, stay safe.